Hi, I hope that you're doing well today. I started this channel to talk about my son who has hypoplastic left heart syndrome, to tell some stories about some of the things that we've been through together and just talk about our journey um, as a parent and as someone who loves someone with this condition. So today I want to talk about the day he was born and the week that after he was born. So I I want to tell these stories for a few reasons. One reason is because when we first received our diagnosis, I didn't really find a lot of people who were talking about this, about hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And I just want to be a voice out there as someone who's had real life experience dealing with this as a mom, as a parent. And I also want to be like, hopefully say some things that maybe somebody wants to hear or needs to hear. I know that for myself, it would have been comforting um, to hear someone like me who'd gone through these things just talk about them. So sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes, a lot of times, it's not easy to talk about it. And I feel like I need to talk about it. So, so today I want to talk about when he was born. So before he was born, we decided that the best thing to do would be to relocate to the city where he was going to have his first open heart, or he actually had all of his open heart surgeries here, but to the place where he was going to have his first open heart surgery. Because with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, you have about 48 hours maybe before the septum starts to close in the baby's heart. And so at that point, the heart tries to overcirculate. And the problem with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, is that the left ventricle is so underdeveloped that it can't fill up with blood. And the aortic arch is so small that blood can't pass through it. So for my son, one of the things that they did was that the way that the specialist described it, they said that they rewired his plumbing. They said it's a plumbing issue. So they had to do some pretty extensive repairs for that first surgery, and it was called the Norwood Procedure. The first surgery was called the Norwood Procedure. So um, so the day that he was born, all right, the day that he was born, we decided to do an induction because I had made it to 39 weeks and still had no signs of labor, and he was growing really well. He was my biggest baby. He weighed almost 8 pounds, not quite 8 pounds, but he was pretty close. He weighed 7 pounds, 13 ounces, and the doctors said that he was the biggest hypoplast baby they'd ever seen. They said that a lot of times hypoplast babies are small. So they were really happy that he was as big as he was, because the bigger he was when he was born, the bigger his heart would be, which means that it would be easier for them to do the procedure. So the day of my induction, they wanted to start the induction at 7 a.m. So we tried to get there at 6 because we wanted to just be there extra early and be ready. And about 6:15 or 6:30, they called me back, and I actually had to sign a piece of paper saying that I was comfortable having my husband back there with me. So once they let him come back there with me, my labor and delivery nurse came to say hello, and she introduced herself, and she was such an incredible lady. She was, I think she told me that she was one of the, she was one of the people who helped, um, like rescue people or help people after the September 11th attacks. Like, she was at the World Trade Center helping people. So this lady was my labor and delivery nurse, and she took all of my feelings and all of my emotions seriously. You know, I don't really like needles. I know that you can't avoid needles when you're in labor, but they were going to put an IV in each one of my hands, and I begged her to only give me one if she could. And so um, that was difficult because I tested positive for group B, and so I had to have antibiotics during labor. And so she said, I'm going to make a phone call because they're not going to like it, but I'm going to make a phone call, and we're just going to do one IV on you, and I'm just going to do piggybacks, and we're going to make it work. And she made it work so that I only had to have one. They did my left hand. I only had to have one hand that had an IV port in it. So another thing that she did for me was that she really helped me stay calm throughout the induction process, because it's stressful enough to be in labor, but when you're in labor with a baby that you know is sick and you don't know what's going to happen to him after he's born, it's like doubly stressful. So she helped me through all those emotions. She was able to talk me down and keep me calm. And I don't know how she did it, but she was amazing. That's the only way I know to say it. She was amazing. And she advocated for me. So the doctor that was there that day was a guy that I'd never met before, but he, at one point, he seemed like he was kind of in a hurry. Like he was, like, he got irritated at me a couple times um, because some of the things he was trying to do were kind of painful. And so from his perspective, I was being difficult. And there was one time he was doing some things that were just like, it kind of hurt, it just kind of hurt. And so he left the room, and she said, is he hurting you? Because if you don't like him, I can make him go away, and we'll find you a new doctor. And so I said, you know, he kind of is hurting me, but I think it's almost time for him. Like, his shift was almost over anyway. So I said, I can handle him for a couple more hours. And she said, okay, well, if you change your mind, let me know. So that's another amazing thing that my nurse did for me. Like, she stood up for me. And I think that she went out in the hallway and had a talk with him about, like, um, just the way that he was handling my labor and my induction. And she said, so from now on, I'm going to do all your checks, and he's not going to touch, he'll be here, but he's not going to touch you again. He agreed that he would let me do all that stuff. So I could talk all day about like how much of a difference it made to have a nurse like this woman. So later on in labor, my husband still won't tell me if this was for me or for the baby, my son. But I had to have oxygen. So she put oxygen. She put an oxygen mask on my face, and I heard her say something about my son's blood pressure. So they were concerned about his blood pressure, and after they said that, she put the oxygen on me. So I think maybe I just sort of panicked a little bit, and I needed some help to calm down. So the labor went pretty quickly. They started the IV meds at like 7:45 because they had a lot to do to get me ready, So they started the IV meds at 7:45. They also did a balloon. So they put a balloon in me, and then they pulled it out. I don't know exactly how to describe it or explain it, but they did those two things to try to induce labor. It worked. Um, He was born at 5:38 in the evening, my shortest labor by far. And when he was born, um, something that I kind of wasn't very happy about at the time was that I had asked to have as few people in the room as possible, because I knew that there were going to have to be a few extra people in there to take care of him, because he was going to need, pretty much immediate help. Like, they were going to start IVs in his belly button and start getting medicine going in him pretty much right away. But some other people, like medical students and stuff, like other people were brought in to observe. And part of me was kind of feeling like, I don't know, I guess I didn't want to feel like a circus sideshow. And it made me feel like I was already vulnerable enough being in labor, but to add to that, being in labor with a sick baby and then having all these extra people observe, it was a lot. And it was something that I specifically asked not to happen. And they brought all those extra people in there anyway. So there was a room full of medical students. I think there were 20 or 30 people in the room whenever my son was born. So he was born, and for the first couple of days, really for the first 24 hours or so, maybe the first 12 hours, he did okay. They got him fixed up with the medicine that he needed to get him through for the first couple of days until they could get him ready for surgery. And they took him in an ambulance, and they took him over to the children's hospital. And my night nurse was another, like, really wonderful lady. She took really good care of me, and she helped me a lot with using the breast pump, because I had to use the breast pump because he couldn't nurse right away because he was getting ready to have surgery. So I had to do that for a long time. And so she helped me. She taught me how to use it, and she because it was different than the one I had at home, because it was like the hospital one, like the really, really good one. So she helped me. She taught me how to use that, and she would come and get my milk bottles. After I used it, she would come get my milk bottles and put them in the fridge for me. But the next morning, the nurse that I had the next morning, she didn't really seem to be very interested in helping me. So I remember I called her and I told her that I had some milk that needed to go in the nursery, and she said, "Oh, the nursery is down the hall." So it was like, okay. So I had to wander around and find the nursery, and that just kind of made me feel like, I don't know, I felt pretty alone at that moment. And so the morning that I was discharged, my husband had already gone over to the children's hospital to spend time with our son because he was over there. And he called me, and I was feeling pretty good that morning because they had given me some medicine, like some really good painkilling medicine. So I was feeling pretty good up until the point that he called me, and he said, "Hey, you need to come over here because the surgeons want to talk to us. They're having trouble getting babies' vitals stabilized. They've started him on a bunch of new meds, and you just need to come over here as soon as you can." And so he ended up having to come and get me and help me get over there because, I had just had a baby. So he came and he got me and he helped me get over there. We met the surgical team, and I saw my little boy, and he had about 20 different pumps of IVs going in his body. And the first thing I remember thinking was, this doesn't even look like a baby. Like, he looks like a science experiment. That's what he looked like to me at the moment. And he was, um, he was asleep for like pretty much the first several weeks of his life. The medicine that he was on just kept him like really sleepy all the time. And he was on IV nutrition, so he wasn't like, um, taking a bottle or anything. And so we we spent the first couple of nights in the NICU, like the regular NICU. And Thursday night, he was born on a Wednesday evening. Thursday night was okay, but then Friday night was when he really started to crash. And the NICU doctor called me and said, hey, I just want to let you know he's not doing well. And all of his vitals are crashing, and his oxygen saturation level is really low. So we're going to have to intubate him so that we can, try to help him. And so he said, I really think you should come over here because he's not doing well. So we, threw some things in an overnight bag. We were staying at the place where we had relocated to, and we threw some things in an overnight bag, and we hurried over there. And um, when we got there, they had intubated him, and they had gotten him somewhat stable, but it was just like an all-night event. I mean, it took a whole night to get him to a place where his numbers were steady enough. And we didn't know. I mean, there were a few times when I think that we really almost lost him before he had a chance to have that first heart surgery. And we didn't know what was going to happen. But, so the next morning, we went to the hospital cafeteria to get some breakfast. And at some point in that meal, I just like started crying uncontrollably, and like there was no way that I was going to be able to calm down. Like, I just started to ugly cry right in the middle of this hospital cafeteria. Like, couldn't breathe, couldn't, like, just gasping for air, ugly crying right in the middle of the cafeteria. And my husband didn't know what to do. He just like looked at me with this look of like complete helplessness. And I think he cleaned up my tray. Like, he threw my he threw my food away for me, and we just sat there, and he just started handing me napkins because I just couldn't stop crying. And there was this lady sitting at the table next to me, and she said, "Hey, how's your baby doing?" Like, obviously he wasn't doing well, but I understand now that she was just trying to distract me enough for me to have a chance to calm down. So I told her that he was not doing great and that he'd had a rough night the night before. And she started to talk about her baby. And we had this conversation, and whatever she said to me, it worked. And I was able to stop crying. And we went back to his NICU room. And I think we tried to take a nap. And then the surgeons came back to check on him. And one of the surgeons took one look at me, and like his whole face just dropped. He was just like, she doesn't look good. So he asked my husband if they could go out in the hallway and talk for a second. And my husband came back in there and in the room, and he said, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I just got in trouble, and we have to get you out of here. So what the surgeon had said to my husband was, you need to get her out of here, and you need to get her in a bed, and she needs to sleep because she doesn't look good, and she just had a baby. So we got me out of there, and I slept for a few hours. And at that point, my son was he was like, we'd finally gotten him to a point where he was stable enough that I felt like I could sleep a little bit. And then, so we just kind of had to keep that going for the next 2 days. So 2 days later, they said that they wanted to take him back for surgery at 6:45 in the morning. So we got over there. We tried to get over there at 6:30 because we wanted to be early. And they said, if you want to come talk to him and come see him before the surgery, then you need to get here a little bit early because we're going to take him back about 6:45. We want him to be our first patient of the day because we don't know how long the surgery is going to take for sure. I mean, we have an idea of how long it usually takes, but we don't know for sure how long it's going to take. So, come talk to him and come talk to us, and you can stay in his ICU room during the surgery, and we'll call you every hour to give you an update. So we got there, and once again, I must have looked like a complete disaster because one of the surgical assistants had to leave the room because he took one look at me and started crying because that's how pitiful I looked. So I actually made one of the surgical assistants cry because I was in such bad shape. And so they took him back. I think they gave him like a stuffed bunny because it was Easter. So they took him back and they started the surgery. And not very long after they took him back, I don't think I've talked about this part yet, but not very long after they took him back, I got a call from the unemployment office because I had been trying to file for unemployment because I couldn't work while we were going through all this. And so while they were doing the surgery, the people called to tell me that they couldn't give me unemployment that month because I wasn't able and available for work because I had to relocate for this surgery. And so I told them they asked me why I wasn't able and available for work, and I told them this story about my son and how he was actually having his first surgery right at that moment. And the person on the phone said, well, this probably isn't a very good time for this then. I'm sorry. She said, why don't you wait until you get back home and we'll just put this like unemployment thing on hold for now. When you get back home, if you want to try to apply again, then we can start from there. And at that point, when she found out what was happening that day, she kept the conversation pretty short. She was just like, okay, well, this isn't going to work now, but try again later when you're back home. So they called us every hour. The surgery took a little bit longer than they wanted it to, but they were really happy with the way it went. And the next few days, some of the complications that he had started to affect him, and complications are a whole different subject. I could talk about those for hours because he had quite a few complications from surgery. One of the most immediate complications that he had was that he had an excessive amount of fluid buildup in his lungs in places where fluid shouldn't be. So that was one of his first major complications that we had to figure out how to deal with. But from then on, it was just the next few weeks of, encountering challenges and trying to find ways to face them. And I think that's all I want to say for now. I'll talk some more about like his recovery from surgery and some of the complications that he had, and some of the ways that I tried to manage having a child in the hospital and then having two other children at home 3 hours away. So as time went on, I started to commute back and forth. So instead of staying at the hospital all the time, I would spend 3 days at the hospital, and then I'd have a day to travel, and then I'd spend 3 days at home. and then I went back and forth between my kids. So that's the short version of that. But trying to think what else I want to say at the moment. I think I want to end this here for now, and thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you have a good day today and every day. And if you'd like to talk with me sometime, please let me know. Leave me a comment. Be happy to talk to you. Bye.